What do you do when the people who raised you, the ones who should have been your biggest champions, the ones who should have believed in you the most, look you straight in the eyes? Not with anger, but with a weary disappointment, and say, you know, compared to your sister, you're just the failure of the family. Think about that soul-crushing label, delivered by the very people whose job it was to lift you up. What do you do when every single bit of love, every opportunity, every ounce of support, and every single financial advantage is handed, without question, without hesitation, to your sibling, while you're left standing in the shadows, expected to simply survive on whatever scraps are left over? Well, in today's story, we meet Elena. She wasn't the golden child. She wasn't the one destined for greatness. At least not in her parents' eyes. She was the overlooked one. The quiet one. The one they worried about. Often out loud. In her presence. But Elena didn't fight back with words. She didn't scream. Didn't argue. Didn't beg for their approval or their attention. She didn't even cry in front of them. She stayed quiet. And for 10 long years. She worked. She built. She grew. All of it, in the shadows. They had no idea what she was doing. Who she was becoming. They were too busy focusing on their shining star. Until the day came. The day they had never, ever anticipated. When the very same parents who had called her useless, who had dismissed her potential, who had invested everything in her sister's future while leaving her to fend for herself, had to pick up the phone and, with desperation in their voices, ask her for help. And what she did next. Let's just say, it wasn't what anyone expected. It was quiet. It was precise. And they, her parents, the architects of her pain, will never, ever forget it. I grew up in a small suburb just outside of Seattle. From the outside, we looked like the quintessential happy, middle-class American family. A nice house with a tidy lawn. 2 cars in the driveway. Family photos smiling from the mantelpiece. But inside that house, behind the closed doors, there were 2 entirely different sets of rules. One set for me, and a completely different, far more lenient, far more privileged set for my older sister, Isabel. Isabel was the golden child. From the moment she was born, she shone. She was naturally gifted, effortlessly excelling at everything she touched. Straight A's in school came easily to her. She was a talented pianist. Her recitals the highlight of my parents' social calendar. She was popular, the undisputed prom queen in high school, effortlessly charming everyone she met. She was, from a young age, destined for an Ivy League college. Her future meticulously planned and enthusiastically supported by my parents. And me? I was quiet, the opposite of Isabel in almost every way. I wasn't the life of the party. I preferred spending time in my room, lost in books, building intricate worlds in my imagination. I taught myself how to build websites on our clunky family computer, spending hours coding and designing while Isabel was at cheerleading practice or debate club. I didn't fit their image. I wasn't the outgoing, trophy-winning, socially magnetic child they seemed to have envisioned. I was the quiet, bookish one who liked computers. The one who didn't bring home perfect report cards without effort. The one who seemed content in her own company. The favoritism wasn't always overt. Not at first. It was in the nuances. The subtle differences in how we were treated. Isabel's achievements were celebrated with fanfare. Mine were met with polite nods. Her mistakes were excused as youthful indiscretions. Mine were seen as character flaws. Her interests were encouraged with lessons and equipment. Mine were largely ignored. When I was 15, the reality of their perception of me landed like a punch to the gut. I was walking past the kitchen, grabbing a snack, when I heard my mom talking to a neighbor over the fence. Their voices were low, but in the quiet afternoon air, the words carried, "Isabel's going to make us so proud." My mom said, her voice warm with maternal pride. "She's got such a bright future." The neighbor mumbled something I couldn't quite hear. And then my mom's voice came again, dropping slightly, a note of weary resignation in it. "Elena," she sighed, "I just hope she figures herself out someday. I don't know what she's going to do. I just hope she figures herself out someday." That sentence stuck with me. It wasn't angry, wasn't even particularly harsh. It was just dismissive. Like I was a problem to be solved. A disappointment they hoped would eventually sort herself out. It was in stark contrast to the shining certainty of Isabel's future. The future they were actively building for her. And then came college. Isabel, naturally, got into Brown, her top choice. My parents were ecstatic. They threw a huge party, bought her a brand new laptop, and wrote a check for the first year's tuition without a moment's hesitation. The college fund they had been talking about for years, the money they had saved for their children's education, was all going to Isabel. Every single penny. When it was my turn, 2 years later, I had worked hard, gotten good grades, and been accepted into a solid state university. A place that felt like a good fit for me. A place where I could explore my interests in technology and business. I sat down with my parents, hopeful, armed with brochures and tuition estimates. They looked at the numbers, then looked at each other. My dad cleared his throat. "Elena," he said, his voice kind but firm. We just don't have enough for you." "But the college fund?" I asked, confused. Well, Brown was expensive," my mom said, avoiding my eyes. "And Isabel's graduate school plans, we need to support her. She's got such potential. Maybe," my dad added, "you could try community college first. See if you even like it." Community college. It felt like a slap in the face. Not because there's anything wrong with community college, but because of the clear disparity. The lack of belief it represented. They had poured everything into Isabel's expensive 4-year degree. Her grad school, her future. For me, the suggestion was a cheaper, less ambitious path, coupled with the implicit message that they didn't believe I was worth the same investment. So I did. I enrolled in the local community college, and I worked nights and weekends at a diner to pay for it. Serving greasy burgers and stacking dirty plates while my classmates were studying or socializing. I paid for my books, my fees, my transportation. Every single dollar came from my own pocket. They never came to my community college graduation. They said it was too far, too inconvenient. Isabel was starting her new apartment downtown, and they needed to help her move in. Another check written, another favor granted, while I stood in a borrowed cap and gown, accepting my associate's degree to polite applause from strangers. The message was clear. Isabel was the priority. Isabel was the investment. I was on my own. Isabel, with my parents' financial backing, thrived in their definition of success. After Brown, she sailed through grad school, getting a degree in marketing. Then, armed with a business plan that was more aspiration than concrete strategy. And a significant chunk of my parents' retirement fund, a cool $100, she launched a beauty brand. It was niche, high-end, and exactly the kind of glamorous venture my parents could brag about at dinner parties. They poured everything into her business. And into her life. They gave her a generous down payment on a chic condo in a trendy part of the city. They bought her a new, expensive car, a sleek German sedan, because her old one wasn't fitting for a CEO. They even paid her assistant's salary for the first year, ensuring she had the support she needed to focus on the big picture. Isabel was living the life they had envisioned for her, a life of ease and opportunity, underwritten by their unwavering support. Their conversations were always about Isabel, her business, her latest collection, her social media presence, her next big launch. My life, meanwhile, was a non-topic. Me? I was working customer service at a large tech firm, answering phones, dealing with irate customers, making just enough to pay my rent. Student loan, from community college. Small as it was still there. And buy groceries. I was eating frozen burritos for dinner more often than I cared to admit. But every night, after work, after the frozen burrito, I was in my room, teaching myself to code. I took online courses, watched tutorials, practiced for hours, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. I was building skills, quiet skills, the kind that didn't come with fanfare or applause. I kept my head down, worked hard at my day job, and poured all my energy into this secret second life I was building online. I didn't tell my parents about the coding, the late nights studying, the small freelance projects I started taking on to earn extra cash. What was the point? They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't care. They would just compare it to Isabel's glamorous beauty brand and find it lacking. One day, I almost broke my rule of silence. I had an idea for a side project. A small online business selling digital products. I needed a little bit of seed money. Just enough to cover some initial software costs and perhaps a small marketing push. It wasn't much. Maybe $2. A fraction of what they'd given Isabel without blinking. I swallowed my pride and called my dad. I explained the idea, keeping it simple, emphasizing the potential for growth. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, he laughed. Not a warm, encouraging laugh. A dismissive, slightly condescending chuckle. "You'd just waste it, Elena," he said, his voice laced with amusement. "That's not your kind of thing. You're not a builder like your sister." Not a builder. The words echoed my mom's earlier sentiment. A confirmation that their perception of me hadn't changed. I wasn't the one who could create. Who could succeed? Who was worthy of investment? That was Isabel. I was just me. I smiled. A tight, humorless smile he couldn't see. And I said nothing. There was no point in arguing. In trying to convince him. His mind was made up. His belief was invested elsewhere. But inside, something snapped. It wasn't a loud, violent snap. It was quiet, like a rubber band stretched past its limit, breaking silently in the dark. It was the sound of the last thread of hope for their approval. Their recognition, their belief in me, finally breaking, and in that moment, something new took its place. A cold, hard determination. From that moment on, everything shifted. I stopped waiting for validation. I stopped hoping they would see my potential, see my worth, see me, the little updates I used to give them about my life, my small victories, my new skills. They stopped. I stopped showing them the websites I built, the code I wrote, the designs I created. I stopped updating them on my progress, on the late nights, on the sacrifices. What was the point? They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't care. Their attention, their pride, their money, was all focused on their golden child. Instead, I built, in silence. In the shadows they had assigned me. My small side project, the one my dad thought I would just waste, became my obsession. I poured every spare moment into it. I launched a simple website selling digital planners, a niche market I had identified through my online research. It wasn't glamorous, wasn't something you could brag about at a dinner party, but it was mine. I started a small YouTube channel, focusing on productivity tips and digital tools, sharing the knowledge I was accumulating. It was slow going at first, filming videos in my cramped apartment, editing them late at night. But I was consistent. I grew a small but dedicated following. I freelanced on weekends, taking on coding and design projects for clients I found online, building my portfolio, earning extra cash that went directly back into my growing ventures. I built an email list, nurtured a small online community, learning about digital marketing, about connecting with people who valued what I had to offer. I devoured books on branding, on automation, on e-commerce platforms like Shopify, on search engine optimization, on building a sustainable online business. I taught myself how to run ads, how to create compelling content, how to turn skills into income. While Isabel was attending glitzy industry events and posting carefully curated photos of her fabulous life, I was hunched over my laptop, often until the early hours of the morning. I didn't party, I didn't date, I didn't complain about the unfairness of it all. I channeled every ounce of frustration, every sting of dismissal, every quiet hurt into building something tangible, something real, something that was mine and mine alone. It was a lonely path. There was no one cheering me on, no one offering financial support, no one to share the small victories with. My parents were oblivious, still focused on Isabel's latest product launch or marketing campaign. When they asked about my job, I kept it vague, letting them believe I was still working in customer service at the tech firm. It was easier that way. It kept me safely in the background. The failure, they didn't need to worry about, allowing me to build my empire in peace. By the time I was 27, just 5 years after my dad had dismissed my idea and my potential, I had 3 small online businesses running concurrently. They weren't glamorous, weren't making headlines, but they were profitable. Quietly, steadily profitable. Collectively, they were generating over $20 a month in passive and active income. But no one knew, not my parents, not even Isabel, who was still the center of their universe. They still thought I worked at a call center, still thought I was just trying to figure myself out. And I let them think that. Because silence? It can be your greatest weapon. It allows you to move, to build, to grow, unseen and unhindered. It allows you to surprise everyone when the time is right. At 30, I decided it was time to formalize things. To bring my disparate online ventures under one umbrella. I officially incorporated under the name Alara Media Group. It sounded professional, established, something that hinted at the scale of what I had built. My digital planner brand had expanded, reaching a global audience. My small YouTube channel about productivity had exploded, hitting 500,000 subscribers and becoming a significant source of income through ad revenue and sponsorships. I launched a comprehensive online course on building a digital business, sharing the strategies and tactics I had learned through years of trial and error. It resonated with people, selling over $300 worth of enrollments in the first 6 months alone. I hired a small team of virtual assistants and freelancers, managing my growing empire from my laptop. I was still living relatively simply, reinvesting most of my profits back into my businesses and saving aggressively. The frozen burritos were a distant memory, but I wasn't living a life of flashy luxury. I was building something bigger, something that represented not just financial success, but a profound sense of self-reliance and vindication. Then, I bought a house, not a mansion, not something overly ostentatious, but a nice house, a very nice house, and there was a particular satisfaction in choosing it. It was the same model as Isabel's condo, the same layout, the same square footage, but it was in a better neighborhood. A more desirable part of the city with excellent schools and a higher property value. And I didn't take out a mortgage. I paid for it in full. In cash. The ultimate symbol of my quiet, independent success. Still, I didn't post it on social media. I didn't announce it to my family. I didn't brag. The house remained my private sanctuary. Another piece of the life I was building in secret. My parents still didn't know what I did for a living. Still thought I was just plugging away at a mundane office job. Still occasionally expressing their concern about my lack of clear direction. Especially compared to Isabel's high profile, albeit struggling, business. And then came the day they called me. I saw their names flash on my phone screen, Mom and Dad. I answered, expecting the usual pleasantries, the usual questions about my non-existent office job, followed by a lengthy update on Isabel's latest endeavors. But their voices were different. Shaken, desperate. My mom was crying. Isabel's business had crashed, spectacularly and publicly. It wasn't just failing, it was facing serious legal trouble. She was under investigation for financial mismanagement, for using business funds for personal expenses, for inflated numbers and questionable practices. The glamorous facade had crumbled, revealing a messy, unsustainable reality. And the safety net my parents had so generously provided? It was gone. They had remortgaged their home, their dream home, to inject more money into Isabel's failing venture. Convinced they could save it. Convinced their golden child would pull through. Now, Isabel was facing potential ruin. And my parents, they had nowhere to go. They had gambled their future on their golden child. And they had lost. I still remember the exact words from my mom, delivered through her sobs. Elena, oh, Elena, we need you. The silence on my end stretched for 5 seconds. 5 long, deliberate seconds where the weight of years of neglect, of dismissal, of being told I wasn't enough, hung in the air. 5 seconds where I wasn't just their daughter, but the architect of a life they knew nothing about. Then, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, devoid of the emotion that was swirling inside me. You told me I was useless. There was a stammered gasp on the other end. My mom's voice was thick with desperation. We were wrong, Elena. So wrong. Please, Isabel is struggling. We might lose the house. We have nowhere to go. Their dream house. The house they had prioritized over my education. Over my potential. The house they had risked everything for Isabel. I didn't give them an answer right away. I told them I would meet them. Not at their house. Not at my place. At a neutral location. A local cafe. Quiet and unassuming. They agreed immediately. Their relief palpable even over the phone. When I arrived at the cafe the next day, they were already sitting at a small table in the corner. Looking tired, anxious, and years older than I remembered. The usual air of proud confidence was gone. replaced by a visible desperation. I sat down opposite them. We exchanged a few strained pleasantries. The air thick with unspoken history. With their unspoken need and my quiet awareness of it. Then, without a word, I reached into my briefcase and placed a document folder on the table between us. They looked at it, then at me, a question in their eyes. "Open it," I said softly. My dad, his hands trembling slightly, reached for the folder. He opened it and pulled out the document inside. It was a purchase agreement. A deed. He scanned the names, the address, the amount. His eyes widened in disbelief. My mom leaned over, looking at the paper, her breath catching in her throat. It was the deed to their house. I had bought it, not just put in an offer. I had gone through the process quietly, efficiently, working with their bank behind the scenes as soon as I heard about their troubles. I had cleared their outstanding mortgage, settled their debt, and taken legal ownership of the property. In cash, my dad whispered, his voice hoarse with shock. You bought it?" I nodded, meeting his gaze. "Yes, Dad, I bought it." I paused, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "It was always your dream house, right?" They nodded, speechless. I leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm, still quiet. "Good." I picked up another document from the folder. A standard rental lease agreement. "Then I hope you enjoy renting it, because you'll be signing a lease with my company." Their jaws dropped simultaneously. The shock on their faces was absolute. "What?" My mom gasped, the word a strangled cry. I leaned back in my chair, the quietest I had ever been, and delivered the words that had been forming in my mind for years. For a decade of being overlooked and underestimated. 10 years ago, I said, my voice clear and steady. "You told me I wasn't a builder. You told me I'd just waste $2. You invested everything in Isabel and left me to figure things out on my own." I paused, letting the weight of those words hang in the air. "Well," I finished, a sense of quiet triumph filling me. "I figured it out, and I built this moment." This wasn't just about buying a house. It was about flipping the script. About redefining the power dynamics. About proving them wrong in the most undeniable way possible. It was about showing them that the failure they had dismissed had built an empire in the shadows. An empire strong enough to purchase the very foundation of their lives. That night, alone in my car, parked on a quiet street overlooking the city lights, I cried. It wasn't a cry of anger, or even sadness. It was a release, a culmination of years of suppressed emotion, of quiet hurt, of relentless effort fueled by a desperate need to prove my worth. As the tears streamed down my face, a profound understanding settled over me. I had stopped needing their approval a long time ago. The need had been replaced by a fierce independence, a quiet confidence born from building something from nothing, entirely on my own. This wasn't revenge, not in the typical sense of inflicting pain or seeking retribution for its own sake. This was balance. They had made their choices. They had given everything to Isabel. Poured all their resources, all their belief, all their love, into her future, and they had left me to build alone. So I built alone, in silence, in the shadows, and now, when they had nothing left, when the future they had invested in had crumbled, I was giving them exactly what they had given me when I needed it most, a place to stay. A roof over their heads. But there would be no trust. Not the kind they had so readily extended to Isabel. There would be no favors granted. No blank checks written. There would be no warmth. No unwavering support. No belief in their inherent potential. Just a legal agreement, a lease, a tenant-landlord relationship. They moved into their former home 2 weeks later, signing the lease agreement with Alara Media Group. The irony was heavy, palpable. They were renting the house they had once owned. The house that represented their investment in Isabel. From the daughter they had called useless. It was a quiet transaction. No fanfare, no public display, just a simple exchange of documents. A quiet acknowledgement of the new reality. They were safe. They had a home, but they were no longer in control. They were dependent on the daughter they had overlooked. Some revenge is loud. It arrives with shouting, with public confrontations, with the satisfaction of seeing your enemy brought low for everyone to witness. But the best kind of retribution? The most potent kind? Is quiet. It is patient. It is intentional. Elena didn't scream. She didn't expose her parents' favoritism to the world. She didn't post her wins online to make them feel small. She didn't argue or demand an apology. She built. She channeled her pain, her hurt, her quiet determination into creating something real, something substantial. And in doing so, she proved a truth that many people, especially those blinded by privilege or bias, often forget. The ones you ignore today may very well be the ones you depend on tomorrow. So if you've ever been called useless, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or forgotten by the people who should have seen your light, don't fight. Don't beg for their attention or their approval. Build. Build your skills. Build your life. Build your own empire, brick by painstaking brick, in the quiet moments, in the shadows, and let your silence become your legacy. Let your success be the only statement you need to make.